In the kingdom's darkest hour, a legendary weapon was finally revealed. A glowing green blade forged from the rarest metal known as orichalcum. Unbreakable, impossibly durable. In the hands of its worthy wielder, it feels as light as a feather, yet strikes with 10 times the power of any ordinary sword. And that's only a fraction of its true potential. The crowd stood in awe, but this masterpiece wasn't crafted by some royal blacksmith. No, though. It was the work of a simple countryside smith named Bill Bark. Bill stepped forward, looking embarrassed by all the attention. He scratched the back of his head and spoke softly. I just wanted to use my skills to bring peace to the world. The hero, the man destined to defeat the Demon King, accepted the sword with shining eyes. Even he was impressed. Bill politely warned him, the sword's full power would only awaken through the wielder's own skill. Later, Bill pulled his childhood friend Sepia aside. His hands trembled as he held out a beautiful orichalcum ring he had secretly forged just for her. He tried to confess his feelings, but the words wouldn't come out right. Sepia smiled gently and took his hand. Give this to me, only after the Demon King is defeated. Bill understood. She had feelings for the hero instead. His heart ached, but he forced a smile. He wished her happiness, and quietly stepped aside so she could stay by the hero's side. Bill had always seen himself as a background character. He was content to support the hero's story and let them have their happy ending. 4 years later, the Demon King had been defeated. Peace should have come. But in a quiet forest forge, Bill worked alongside his Uncle Phil and young apprentice Tom. Uncle Phil slammed his hammer down in frustration. What did saving the world ever accomplish, huh? Look at these crushing taxes. They're squeezing out small forges like ours while favoring those big state workshops. Bill tried to calm him. Uncle, I'm proud I helped the hero. We'll find a way. This is the life I chose. Night fell under strict curfew enforced by the new Lord Protector, the hero himself. The next day, Bill headed into the city alone, carrying a small case of tools, hoping to earn extra coin by offering repairs. The streets were restless. Merchants protested loudly against the empire's unfair trade policies that only benefited large guilds. Bill watched from the side, shaking his head. Fools, risking their lives and their families like this. It's not my problem. Then he froze. Among the shouting crowd was his Uncle Phil. Before Bill could react, a knight stepped forward and declared martial law. Soldiers raised their spears. Chaos erupted. Screams filled the air. Blood sprayed across the ground. A drop even splattered across Bill's shocked face. Run, Bill, his uncle shouted. Bill snapped out of his daze, grabbed his uncle's arm, and pulled him into a narrow alley. Follow me, I know a way out. Soldiers pursued, cutting down anyone in their path. As they ran, lungs burning, something awakened inside Bill. The world around him transformed. The alley walls glowed with blue lines, like glowing blueprints revealing every structural weakness. Only he could see it. His eyes locked onto a red glowing point on the wall. Bill pulled out his hammer and struck with perfect precision. The wall crumbled just enough to open a hidden passage behind them, blocking the soldiers. They escaped into the safety of the forest. Back at the forge, Bill collapsed, shaking. Tears welled in his eyes. Why did they attack like that? We were just protesting. His uncle hugged him tightly. I'm sorry, Bill. Bill broke down, terrified of losing the only family he had left. Please, promise me you'll stop. Don't risk yourself anymore. Uncle Phil comforted him and gave his word, for now. Bill had only wanted a quiet, simple life. The morning after the narrow escape, a fragile calm settled over the forest forge. Bill tried to push the horror of the protest from his mind, but peace never lasted. Soldiers suddenly stormed the forge. Shouts filled the air as they arrested everyone for treason. Bill stood frozen in shock. How had they found this hidden place so quickly? The fugitives from the protest cried out in anger. One of them pointed straight at the young apprentice. Tom, you betrayed us. Tom lowered his head, unable to meet Bill's eyes. He admitted it. The soldiers had promised him a reward, enough money to rebuild the forge and clear all debts. He saw Uncle Phil as a burden, with his drinking and reckless protests. I'm sorry, Bill, but someone had to save the workshop. Bill's world shattered again. His own apprentice, the boy he had trained and trusted, had sold him out. Dragged before the throne, Bill faced the man he once admired most, the hero now known as Oliver Prime, the Lord Protector. Oliver looked down at him with a cold smile. He cleared Bill's name with a wave of his hand, even paying off the forge's debts. He praised Bill as the greatest blacksmith on the continent, greater than any royal smith. Bill dared to ask about Sepia. Oliver lied smoothly. She's on an important mission. She'll return soon. Bill begged for his uncle's release. Oliver laughed it off as a joke, then promised to look into it. Relieved but uneasy, Bill returned to the forge. Tom had left a letter and some money behind before disappearing. Bill threw himself into work, preparing gifts and repairs for when Sepia and Uncle Phil finally came home. Then came the visitors. One wooden coffin were carried into the quiet forge and dumped roughly in the dirt. Bill's heart stopped cold. Instead of the joyful reunion he had hoped for, he saw her. Sepia was sitting lifelessly on top of the closed coffins, like a discarded doll. Her skin was pale gray. Her eyes were vacant and empty. She drooled uncontrollably, wearing a strange broken smile. Bill stared in stunned silence, his voice trembling. Sepia? What happened to your leg? At his words, Sepia suddenly collapsed against the coffin and slumped lifelessly to the ground. Only then did Bill understand. He rushed forward with shaking hands and lifted the lid of the coffin. Inside lay Uncle Phil, cold and lifeless, his body still. Sepia, Uncle! Bill screamed in pure, gut-wrenching agony, roaring at the heavens and at the cruel lies Oliver had told him. His eyes glowed with uncontrollable power as overwhelming rage flooded his veins. In that moment of absolute heartbreak, Bill made a silent vow deep in his shattered soul. He would no longer remain the humble background character. He would repair the hero's sword and use that very blade to strike at the heart of the empire itself.
A few days ago, as Bill was returning from the hero's castle, the hero, who is now king, and whom the people call Lord Protector, he was given a gold token. This token signified that he was now the royal blacksmith, granting him unrestricted access to the castle at any time. The very next day, Bill went to the castle, under the pretext of repairing the hero's sword, his heart pounded with cold purpose. The blade he had once forged with pride now felt like the perfect instrument for vengeance. As Bill worked on the sword, polishing its edge under the dim light of the royal forge, the hero turned toward him and remarked calmly, "From now on, no life shall be taken within my kingdom." While they were talking, and just as the hero's attention momentarily drifted away from Bill, he seized the opportunity. In one swift motion, Bill grabbed the sword and swung it with all his strength toward the hero's back. But the hero turned around with a self-satisfied smile. In an instant, he fired a glowing message arrow straight into Bill's shoulder. The impact sent searing pain through his body. Bill dropped to his knees, the sword clattering loudly onto the stone floor. Soldiers immediately rushed in from every entrance and apprehended him, pinning his arms behind his back. At that moment, Bill looked up through gritted teeth and asked, "How long have you known?" The hero replied with a steady voice, "The question isn't how long I've known. The real question is, why didn't I kill you once I did know? Because I want you to become my royal blacksmith." Bill's eyes widened in disbelief. "I tried to kill you, yet you still want to answer one of my questions." Bill then asked the question that had burned in his soul for years. Why did that happen to Sepia? The hero paused, his expression darkening with memory. Sepia. Yes, she too was incredibly capable. During the final battle against the Demon King, she lost her legs. Once humanity lost the Demon King, their common enemy, they began pursuing their own selfish desires and turned against one another. Bill could hear the weight in the hero's words, but it only fueled his anger. Ooh-ah. You know full well that the kingdom soon plunged into a state of war. At that time, the kingdom's strength was at its lowest ebb. We had no choice but to send even our heroes to the front lines. All of them, except her. The hero's voice grew quieter. Do you know what true loneliness feels like? Do you understand what it means to be left behind while watching your comrades continue to fulfill their duties? Consumed by that loneliness, she reached out and touched something that no one ever should have dared to touch. The hero's gaze hardened, and so she returned to the battlefield. Bill's face twisted with rage. He shouted, "You have witnessed the ill effects of black magic firsthand. Why didn't you save her? That was your responsibility. She lost her legs fighting on your behalf. You are the Lord Protector. You possess the power." The hero's eyes flashed with irritation. "Are you trying to say that this is my fault? You talk big now, but why didn't you come with us to fight the Demon King? You were living a life of peace." Bill screamed back in pure fury, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You coward one who runs away from his responsibilities!" The air grew thick with tension. In that moment, consumed by fury, the hero drew his sword in a blinding arc and severed one of Bill's arms with a single, decisive strike. Blood sprayed across the cold floor as Bill gasped in shock and agony. The hero stood over him, voice cold and commanding. "Now, bear the weight of all those responsibilities with just this one arm." The quiet sanctuary of the isolated forge is shattered by a sudden, sharp knocking. Bill grips the handle and yanks the door open, bracing himself for an enemy. Stepping outside onto the threshold, standing in the open air, is Sarah, the former thief queen of the hero's party. Her eyes lock onto him, a smirk playing on her lips as she sizes him up. Under the open sky, Sarah sighs, tossing a glance around the secluded property. Sarah says, "So that's what happened, huh? Still, thanks to Oliver, the country did develop, didn't it?" The mention of that name hits Bill like a physical blow. Rage, hot and blinding, flares in his chest. His eyes narrow, fixing Sarah with a glare so fiercely angry it could melt iron right there on the porch. Seeing the dangerous spark in his eyes, Sarah raises her hands defensively, her smirk returning. Sarah says, Kidding. Anyway, phew, guess I came for nothing. With your arm like that, you can't even work as a blacksmith." The insult to his pride pierces through Bill's anger, replaced by a cold, stubborn defiance. He clenches his jaw, his voice dropping to a low rumble as he stands his ground outside. Bill says, "I can." Sarah's eyes gleam with calculating mischief. Sarah says, "Then how about making me a new dagger?" Bill says, "No." She doesn't back down, shifting her strategy with practiced ease as the wind brushes past them. Sarah says, "Repairs." Bill says, "No." Sarah sighs, throwing her hands up in mock disappointment, dangling the ultimate bait right in front of his face before she walks away. Sarah says, "Then? Really? That's a shame. I was going to tell you the inside story about Sepia." The name acts like a shockwave. His resistance crumbles instantly on the doorstep. Bill says, "Just this once." Sarah's smirk widens into a triumphant grin. She knew he couldn't resist. Sarah says, "Knew you were reasonable. How much are you charging for the dagger?" Bill looks down at his ruined arm, then back at the woman who holds the key to the past. Bill says, "Cost of materials and Sepia's story." Sarah says, "Deal." Bill retreats into his workshop. The forge finally comes alive with the sparks of burning coal and the heavy sound of striking metal. But as Bill works inside, his mind is miles away, racing with every strike of his hammer. A sickening realization settles deep in his gut as he shapes the glowing iron. That monster twisted the story entirely in his own favor. Bill always knew the hero was hiding something sinister beneath his righteous facade. Through the open window of the forge, Sarah says, "Want to start with how Sepia's leg really ended up like that? Bill, do you honestly think Sepia just couldn't dodge the Demon King? Sepia, who was the second fastest after me?" Bill pauses inside the dim room, the hammer hanging heavy in his hand. The official records, the propaganda fed to the masses, it all claimed the Demon King's speed was godlike. Bill voices his doubt from the shadows of the forge, trying to cling to the lie. Bill says, "The Demon King was that fast and strong too, wasn't he?" Sarah says, He was fast, sure. But what made him terrifying commonly wasn't speed, it was raw destructive power. There's no way Sepia would lose both legs in one go. Sepia didn't fail to dodge. She chose not to protect the hero. And the reason she went back to the battlefield later. The world dissolves into a dark flashback, pulling back the curtain on Oliver's sickening manipulation. Oliver kneels before her, his face a mask of pleading loyalty, hiding a desperate hunger for power. Oliver says, "Sepia, I need your help. If I'm going to become Lord Protector, I have to win this war. But the tide is against us. With you, we can turn it around." Sepia looks down at her useless legs, tears welling in her eyes. The guilt of her helplessness eats her alive. Sepia says, "Sorry, Oliver, I don't think I can. What am I supposed to do with this leg?" A dark gleam flashes across Oliver's face as he leans closer, whispering the forbidden taboo. Oliver says, "Then don't worry about that. You remember that grimoire we found in demon territory, right? With this, not only will you walk again, you might even become stronger than before." Sepia gasps, terror gripping her heart. She knows the cost. Sepia says, "But that's black magic. Black magic is power that shouldn't be used." In an instant, Oliver's righteous facade shatters into pure rage. He barks at her like a tyrant, his voice echoing with terrifying malice. Oliver says, "And so what? Is that really what matters right now? Aren't we comrades? You'd really refuse me over something like that? I thought of us. Of us, as more than just comrades. But you, how could you, after everything?" Sepia shrinks back, utterly terrified by the monster unleashed before her. Sepia says, "Oliver." Seeing her break, Oliver instantly shifts gears, pulling back into a cold, calculated, emotional withdrawal. Oliver says, "Sorry, just pretend today never happened." The psychological trap snaps shut out in the open air. Terrified of losing him and being left behind, Sepia cracks under the immense pressure. She reaches out desperately. Sepia says, "Wait, hold on, I'll help you." Beneath the open sky, a wicked, demonic smirk spreads across Oliver's face. He has won. He has successfully broken her. But he wasn't alone. Hidden just a few yards away, behind a massive rock and thick bushes, Sarah watched the entire horrific exchange. Her breath hitched as she witnessed the true, monstrous nature of the man the world called a hero, helpless to stop the corruption of her friend. Back in the present, the story fades, leaving a suffocating silence inside the forge. Far away, in a lonely room, a sudden, metallic clatter breaks the quiet. Sepia sits completely alone, her trembling fingers failing her as her ring slips away, clattering onto the cold floor, a symbol of a bond built on lies and dark secrets that are finally beginning to unravel. Bill's hands tremble, the cold metal of the ring rattling against his fingertips as he searches Sepia's vacant face. He reaches out, his breathing ragged. Bill says, "Sepia, let me see your hand." Bill says, "This is yours. If you wear it on your finger, you won't lose it." He tries to slide the band onto her finger. It catches. The realization slams into his chest like a runaway train as he forces it against unyielding reality. Bill says, "That's strange. Why doesn't it fit? I made it to fit you perfectly." The dam breaks. Bill collapses inward, dropping to his knees and burying his face into the dirt as raw, guttural sobs tear from his throat. Bill says, "Why?" He cries out to the empty air, the questions clawing at his mind like jagged blades of guilt. Bill says, "Uncle, Sepia, nah, where did it all start going wrong? When I took on an apprentice? When I let Sepia leave without stopping her? When I put a sword in the hero's hand? Or maybe, was it back when I first picked up a hammer in the forge?" He stares at his calloused hands, suffocating under the weight of his choices. Bill says, "Everything I've done, until now, tightens around my throat. proving how powerless I really am. Sepia moves with halting grace, placing a gentle hand on Bill's head. Bill looks up through a blur of tears, a cold, terrifying resolve suddenly crystallizing in his eyes. Bill says, "Sepia, don't tell me, are you trying to comfort me when I never did anything for you? I promise, Sepia. No matter what happens, I will. I will for sure." Sarah says, "So I can pick the dagger up in 2 weeks, right?" Days blur into a frenzy of sparks and screaming metal as Bill works like a man possessed. As she prepares to leave the forge, Sarah pauses at the doorway, the weight of her own past catching up to her. Sarah says, "Bill, back then, I couldn't stop Oliver from using sepia. That means part of the responsibility is mine too. So, if you ever need help, call me. I'll help you, just once." Gears grind and lock into place with a definitive click as Bill attaches a brutal, newly forged mechanical metal arm to his body. Bill says, "I'll make sure I see that revenge is carried out properly,